This current version of G2 is starting to heat up, and although they've been having a little bit more of a rougher start compared to a couple of their other years, I think they're doing pretty hot, and I think some of the core that makes this team so consistently successful and such a trusted brand within the space is starting to show its roots a little bit, and I think they're starting to show a little bit of their style a little bit more with these couple of changes with Skewmon and Labrov at the wheel now with a couple of replacements. However, with this game, they kind of owned up to their own style. And in one of the only regions with the best of one format, I'd like to cover the interesting takes that they end up going for. And I'm not sure if they did this on purpose to kind of what we don't know if this is like on purpose to kind of counter what Heretics were going for and what they think Heretics thrive upon, as well as just maybe they just want to try some styles and what they think is objectively good and what they dictate to be the best way to play the game and gives them the most options, right? So that's what I want to kind of explore a little bit with this one here. They open it up. I want to point your attention here to the Braum bans. That's very interesting because a lot of teams aren't going to first phase Braum like that, but the logic behind it is that Braum definitely guarantees a certain level of safety for all backwards comps, and this then opens up the G2 Ezreal opener. The reason for this is a little bit twofold, right? Because one, this increases the viability of the Ezreal opener because then it disincentivizes Team Heretics from going more of these defensive compositions that revolve around the Braum and things like the front to back AD carries that can thrive and being able to mitigate that. In addition, Braum himself is also going to be able to mitigate some of the poke that Ezreal provides, although this is a little bit more of a supplement to the first reason. So what this also opens up is the G2 Vi option, because when you have guaranteed disengage removed from the table, the power of guaranteed engage is going up and up, right? So Team Heretics end up responding with the Maokai opener, top jungle flex, of course, with the Corki soft flex with mid and AD carry, right? So that's basically the fundamentals behind their strategy going into this. And I think, G2 for the last few years have always have a very sound logic behind the way they draft. I don't think this is anything too new from them. These are the two guys, Dylan Falco, Rodrigo. They've been at it for a while now. The last few, like 3, 4, maybe even 5 years for these guys. And at this point, there's going to be a level of consistency and expectation from them in these drafts. And, with that in mind, from this point on, it just gives enough room for G2 to kind of play out the rest of the draft, right? The G2, Leona is kind of a non-answer. Heretics do a decent job with decent draft fundamentals in terms of being able to ban out a lot of the OPs and things that give them a lot of issues, right? And they try to go for some responses and giving them some options wherever possible, right? So they go Corki response into the Ezreal. They try and match poke for poke, right? That's on paper, that's pretty solid. The Rakan pick, they need their own version of a non-answer, so that for them, this is that. And then they go Wukong into the Vi. On paper, it's actually not too bad, right? So it totally makes a lot of sense, and they have sound fundamentals. I think it's just about picking for the environment and drafting around an environment that they want to go for, and G2 have a pretty strong understanding of that, right? They're going one step beyond just the champions on paper. They're going for, hey, I know your team does not thrive as well as ours. If we produce a certain environment where we're more comfortable and we can navigate the situation a little bit better than you. And that's basically the idea here, right? Just because, let's say, there's forward versus back, and, one team can be better at playing one side of it than the other, or a certain team's playstyle may favor that more than the other. And I think G2 favors that more aggressive sort of like, if they take the fights on their terms, it's going to be very solid because they generally know, with the amount of experience that they generally know what they're looking for. And I can give a few examples of this as well. But basically, wrapping up the part with the Team Heretics comp, they went for a lot of counter picks on paper, and in matchups, it's not too bad, right? Wukong into Vi, Silas into Ahri, Corki into Ezreal. It looks pretty solid on paper, and you even have the Rakan that's soft counter into the Ahri. It hedges a little bit against the Ahri blind. But when you look overall compositionally, I would say they still have a minor disadvantage because of the fact that G2 have more flexibility in terms of what they can do in the fights, and in terms of how Team Heretics pilot the fights. I'm not too sure what they're going for, right? The G2 can comfortably rely on the poke from the Ezreal and the Ahri and just choose their timers with the Vi whenever they want. Whereas Heretics, they if they're trying to match poke, they have Corki, but that's about it, right? It's not as commanding of a level of range and like team fight warping as it would be with the Ezreal, at least in this current game state, in this economy, as one would say. And essentially, there's only so much the Team Heretics comp can do until they just have to pull the trigger. But G2's comp is excellent at mitigating that as well because of things like the Cho'Gath, which manages to hedge well into the Maokai. So now onto the examples of this. This is more, I would say the comps though, or I would say it's still 60-40. I would say Team Heretics did a pretty good job of like overall like identifying where their drafts lie. But like I'll give it a couple of examples as to how the game ended up. The experience shows, let's say, there will be signs of the G2 magic coming through here. So it starts with this set of grubs here. So Team Heretics, I would say conditions are pretty much met. We can backtrack a little bit. Both teams, did a good job of essentially like, no, they're mitigating each other to the best of their ability, but overall conditions are going to be similar. There's not going to be much like direct advantage nor disadvantage for one team or the other, maybe other than the fact that Hansama is out of position slightly just because of the fact that he is stuck on the top wave. I actually would have liked to see Heretics punish this a little bit more because we do understand that G2 is a little bit split here. So the fact that they don't immediately swing and they don't lean towards this left side onto Hansama, I think is a little bit of a freebie from them. There could be some information from them that prevented them from doing this. However, at the same time, when we look at the minimap here, we do see that G2 reveal that they're also addressing the midwave. So this is a good timer for them to actually go for something here. And I think this is something for them to think about. And maybe they're playing against a team like G2. They're a little bit scared. So that's a little bit of a freebie on their side. However, G2 get the bailout, and although Heretics get the grubs, now this is now their timer to actually go in, and because of the Heretics comp not actually having much to suppress a sort of engage like this that G2 can bring, and guaranteed target selection with the Vi, Ahri, Leona, Cho'Gath combo, it actually makes a lot of sense why they end up being able to take over this fight. There was a great timer for them to take this back, but that wasn't really the case here. So I believe this next fight was pretty cool, and it's actually pretty interesting how G2 kind of think about this. So this is another interesting one where I believe Team Heretics have favorable conditions for Dragon. So they are G2 second to midwave actually. So G2 end up just basically giving it up, which is totally respectable because in this case, when you're engaging into if you're a comp like this, pretty squishy, you're trying to go into a comp with like Silas Rakan, like so much consistent engage, it is pretty much asking for a Death Witch. You are overloading onto top side as well, so it's really not too bad in the grand scheme of things as long as they're confident that they are not going to lose the Dragon Soul. So what the interesting part about this is this crazy play onto bottom side. So Team Heretics, they see the overload on top side, they decide to respond in kind. They see the play on bot side. They see Caps is probably going to try to push this bot wave in response because they know Team Heretics burned a lot of their tempo getting the dragon. So they're like, I'm down. Let's go for it. Let's swing. But G2 are covering that for whatever damn reason. I guess they read into that somehow. And they're not going to be able to respond to top side, so they know that Team Heretics' only play and the only thing for G2 to actually do at this moment is to cover bot side because they're basically homeless. They don't have much else to do. But it's just kind of funny that how it ends up playing out so well. They just know, right? And because they have champs like Vi, Leona, Ahri, like the moment they find the target that's out of position, that kid is dead, right? And look at this. So basically, the moment Kamalu dies off of this, right? This is technically advantage state G2. They have, let's call it a power play. They're up a man, right? Look, so basically Broken Blade responds, TP's bottom side, extends this play, forces an advantage state scenario because Maokai has to respond to the top wave because Broken Blade has been just spamming it for the last 3 minutes, right? So they go for numbers advantage dive on bottom side because they know they killed Kamalu. This extension is crazy, by the way. So this is what I love about this G2 team. They just know some of the drills. When they see these patterns, it's like really cool how they manage to get these extensions, right? And that's a great example here. And I think with comps like that, it's a combination of being able to pilot comps like that as well as understanding what they're looking for. So I totally get why this was set up by the draft and then followed through by their execution. So another example, I would consider this like game warping. This probably blew the game open at this point because I think Team Heretics are on a very mild timer. So let's see here. Team Heretics have to walk in. Neither team really wants to walk in that much, so it's a little bit awkward no matter what. The main thing here is that the Team Heretics comp is just like, notice what I meant by the priorities of their champions and like their responses being good on paper, but not being catered to the needs of the meta. And that's basically what happened here. Same case, they ended up walking in. They can't really choose a target because their comp doesn't have enough to do that. Like they have some, but it's not enough, and they don't have enough oomph. So they end up just getting essentially stat checked, even though they got like a decent start to this. Look, Daddy's coming in. Like everybody's just in now, and basically at this point, this game is G2's to win because they've just blown the game open. All the conditions going to be favorable for the rest of the game, and then it's just a matter of time where they just find their correct timer. And then again, in this case, it's basically Otacon, where they just force Team Heretics to do the same play again, and it's very hard for them to play this out. Right? They have to walk in again. They're never going to have favorable states, so it's a bit of a choke. And then basically that's that. And what like you can just see like how ahead G2 it can be thinking and how cohesive their game plan is, and that G2 magic is just showing here. And that's basically the examples I wanted to show from this game, and I thought this was a really cool sign, really good signs for G2 to kind of show their usual selves. And I think I really like the gameplay that I saw here, so hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Really like this. I want to see more of it. Catch you in the next one. See ya.